Hey everybody! Today, Rahdo runs down Shadowrun Crossfire, the Prime Runner Edition, which is basically a reprint and slight upgrade to one of my favorite games of all time, Shadowrun Crossfire. Now, the Prime Runner Edition makes a few little changes here and there, and that is what I'm going to talk about today. I'm not actually going to play this because I've already done a few different run-throughs of Crossfire. You can hit that eye in the top right corner screen to go check them out if you want. One of them was a strategy guide for folks who are having a hard time with Shadowrun Crossfire. But today, I'm just going to be telling you what has changed with this new edition. And before I do, I have to give a huge shout out, a huge thank you to Brian Zimmer, who on Board Game Geek has actually made an incredibly thorough and exhaustive list of every single change between the original and this new version of the game. Me, I'm only going to talk about the big highlights, but if you want to really dive deep and hear what Brian thought, because he's maybe even a bigger super fan of this game than I am, you can find his thread in the links down in the show notes. Right, okay, with all that out of the way, let us enter the Prime Runner Edition, which at first glance is mostly the same. We got the same black market, same Crossfire cards, and the same obstacle deck. Of all of these cards, there's only one change, and it has to do with these low-level obstacles. It's specifically the four really big ones. The Troll Mage, the Orc Bounty Hunter, the Wired Merc, and the Scrybot Tracer. These are all basically just different colored versions of the same thing with, obviously different hit targets and all that. Basically, when they come out, if you've already built up some Crossfire, then what will happen is you will be forced to discard one card. Each of them forces you to discard one if these come up a little later in the game. Now, that's odd because in the original version of the game, like here's my original Troll Mage, they forced you to discard two. So this has definitely made these, well, a little bit less tough. But it's interesting though. It's not like they became, they're still just as hard to kill as they ever were. They still give you just as much money. It's just if they come out in the second or the second or third scene, there's a chance that they might have forced you to discard two. Now they force you to discard one. Here's the deal. When you got to the second and third scene, if you wouldn't be able to handle discarding two cards, you've probably already lost anyway. So I don't know that this really makes that much of a difference. I think this is just more because a lot of people complained that these were just too tough if they came out at the beginning of the game, and this doesn't even help if they come out at the beginning of the game. But still, they've been nerfed a tiny, tiny bit. And that's it. All of the other Crossfire and obstacle cards are exactly the same. The black market cards are all exactly the same. So there's not much more to say about all of them. Let's get them out of the way. Let's talk missions. Now, the original game came with Crossfire and Extraction, where you have to get the client out, and the Dragon Fight. And so these are all still here about the only changes. I think the Dragon now has rules for being 5 or 6 player, which is, by the way, a big change. The original Crossfire only played up to 4. Now there are rules for 5 or 6 players, borrowed from, the Dragonfire. But anyway, one nice little tweak is, where is it? The client, if you're extracting the client, he actually now properly has his life meter like he's supposed to. In the original game, he did not. So that's kind of a nice fix. But for the most part, this is all the same. However, Ambulators and Close the Portal have now been added. These were missions that you could download off of the publisher's website and print out for yourself. It's nice just to have them at the ready now, instead of having to go and download and print them out. Ambulators is a particularly worthwhile one to include because this is kind of an introductory, I wouldn't say tutorial because it's still challenging, but it's a good introduction before you start jumping into the meat and potatoes of the game, Crossfire. So, comes with a few more missions, which is nice, although most of them were available before. The stickers haven't changed at all. Although the interesting thing is, there's all the stickers that came with the original game, plus the stickers that came in the original expansion, High Caliber Ops. Now, nothing else from High Caliber Ops. The other types of missions, the new black market cards, none of that stuff made in here. No vehicular combat, unfortunately. But interestingly, the stickers from High Caliber Ops did make it in here. So you've got a little bit more variety when you're leveling your characters up after you earn enough karma. So those are there. Let's talk about the actual characters themselves. Now, this is interesting. This is an example of significantly, at least in my opinion, significantly increasing the power of your starting characters and thereby making the game a little bit easier, which I understand why they did it because so many people complain that Shadowrun Crossfire is nigh impossible right out of the gate. Now, that's not true. The developers of Shadowrun Crossfire, they win 90% of the time. So, Shadowrun Crossfire is is not a game of pure blind luck. It is a game of skill, and it takes a lot of practice to develop that skill. Me and Jen, we win about half the time now. Whereas, when we first started out, we would win 1 out of maybe every 6 or 7 tries. Anyway, though, so all of these starting characters have gotten stronger. It's as if all of them, there's several here to choose from, are starting out with 5 karma, which means they have an upgrade from their old starting. Now, of course, the characters themselves are the same. If here's Jen's troll lady. This is the one she's always been playing, and there's the orcs, male and female for each of the 5 classes, elves, dwarves, and humans. So, strictly speaking, at first glance, they pretty much look the same. But if you look a bit more closely, where's that lady dwarf? Come here, lady dwarf. Lady dwarf here, you may notice, she starts with 2 cards, 6 nuyen, and 5 hit points. In the old days, they only started with 5 yen, which is still a pretty big deal. Dwarves were always the rich one, without many cards in hand, but a decent amount of hit points and a lot of money. Now they're even richer. For every one of these basic characters, they all start with either 1 more nuyen, i.e. 1 more buck, 1 more card in hand at the beginning, or 1 more hit point. And, it varies from race to race which one of those 3 upgrades they've gotten. And like I said, that is the equivalent of having played enough to have leveled up the first time and then bought yourself an upgrade for more money, more cards, or more hit points. But that's not all. So, I think this is actually cool. It gives the game a little bit more of a bang right from the get-go, especially if you play with ambulators, which is an easier mission, and you start out with like a level 1 character instead of a level 0 character. So these characters are all just a little bit stronger than they used to be in different ways. I think that's cool. I think that's fine. But this is actually really cool. There is 1 additional troll, orc, elf, dwarf, human. We'll come back to these. And these ones have started out leveled up as well. But instead of getting the extra stat, they get a special power. Let's see. So if you choose to be this human, you have connections, which means you start with the black market 1 bigger than normal. Now, that is the equivalent of, what is it? Shopping agent, which is normally a level up you get once you earn 5 karma. You can get this. That's why I'm saying these characters, it's like they've already leveled up. So he's starting out with a shopping agent. In fact, heck, he's got connections. When he actually hits level 5 or 5 karma, you could give him shopping agent, and then the market has 2 cards. That's actually pretty cool. But he has his normal starting stats like the original. Let's go back to the dwarf again as an example. Where did the dwarf go? Where are you, dwarf? That's orc. There's dwarf. Okay, as you can see, we're back to starting with only 5 bucks instead of 6. So, yeah. So, elves start with the seer ability, and dwarves start with the jury rig ability. Or not dwarves, 1 dwarf. 1 human starts with connections. 1 orc player could start with fury. And finally, 1 troll could start out as a tank, which are all very cool. So, this is really nice. I think this is fantastic, giving players a little bit of a leg up. They don't have to go through those first tough levels trying to get their 5 karma to buy their first level up. They've gotten their first level up, and they can just, start kicking butt a little bit quicker. Although, don't get me wrong. What I found, people talking online about how Shadowrun Crossfire Prime Runner, having picked this up and said, hey, this was supposed to be easier, people still think this is incredibly hard and impossible. And that's because Shadowrun Crossfire has always been a cooperative game that challenges you to break all the habits you've got from any other co-op game ever. It really requires you to think outside the box. And once you can master it, you will do well. But these things will help get started a little bit faster. So that's pretty cool. And another thing that has been thrown in to try to make the game just a little bit more approachable right from the get-go, make it a little bit easier, is the fact that if you're in a situation where you have less than 4 players and therefore 1 or more players has to take on multiple roles, like this dwarf here might be a mage / decker, well, it's always been the case that when that happens, that player gets an extra nuyen right off the bat so they can have a little bit more purchasing power, but now that has been enhanced by them also getting an icon grab right from the get-go that they replace one of their starting cards with. So this mage might say, okay, well, I'll get rid of 1 of my mana to have an icon grab, because for this icon grab to do any good, it needs to be combined with other hack cards. And I gotta say, That's really weird. This feels very strange to me, that a card that is so tied to other cards, and therefore, if you were a decker first and foremost, hey, that'd be really great. That's going to be super powerful for me to add this in with all my others. That's very, very cool. But on the flip side, if I was a mage, oh, that icon grab, I guess it's kind of nice. It seems strange to me that all 4 colors do have effectively a starting extra card to put in, the Whip, Clairvoyance, and Black Market Contract, that at the very least it should have been that, oh, well, if I'm a decker, give me Icon Grab. If I'm a mage, give me Clairvoyance, because that makes more sense for who I am. Oh, that said, I don't understand why this was necessary at all. Quite frankly, the extra Nian always gave you a lot of extra options right from the get-go. So this is here. This is what the rules say. And interestingly, once you get up above 20 karma, you can then take the icon grab out and instead put one of the other ones in if you want. I don't know. I feel like letting all players start leveled up right from the get-go was enough. I don't know that this was absolutely necessary, but hey, it's one of the new rules now, and so it's something to bear in mind. Let's see, now what else? So, of course, we got a bunch of tokens and all of that. Although there is one new type of token in here, exhausted tokens. Now, exhausted was not a concept that existed in the original Shadowrun Crossfire. It was a concept that was introduced in Dragonfire and has now been retrofitted into Shadowrun. And while it's interesting, almost everything about this new update tries to make the game a little bit easier. Nerfing some of those obstacle cards, giving you just a little bit more juice right from the get-go. And actually, there's a change to the way aborting works as well. I'll talk about that in a second. This is the one thing that makes the game harder in a relatively significant way. Because now, once you get staggered, after you've been healed, in regular Crossfire, after you get healed, you're back 100% to normal, everything's fine. And a big part of strategy in the game is knowing when to let your team get staggered, because you're follow that up with a heal, so they come right back, and you can, kind of juggle your character, let them get hurt. But now what happens is, after they've been staggered, even after you heal them back, they remain exhausted. And while a character is exhausted, they can only ever draw 1 card per round, and that is a huge noose around your neck. That really ups the difficulty quite a bit. And for my money, it also ups the frustration factor. I am not a fan of the exhausted system in Dragonfire. I am not a fan of it here. Now, like I said, it's officially part of the rules now, but if you wanted to, I think you could just ignore that. Ignore these exhausteds altogether, because I don't see any good coming from them at all. The way exhausteds work is you have to survive until the end of a scene. Then when you go to the next scene, you'll make it. But as often as not, players are getting temporarily staggered and then healed in the final scene, and that means in the final scene you will never get rid of that exhaustion, and no bueno. I do not like this at all. If you pick up Prime Runner Edition, I would strongly recommend ignoring the exhausted. Sure, take the nerfs off of the obstacle cards, take the extra little bonus at the beginning, but ignore these. They're lousy. They're just no fun. They get in the way of fun. I am not a fan of this. Okay, so continuing on. Oh, one more thing that I have to talk about with these characters is the actual design. Again, if you compare, here's what Dwarf Lady looked like originally. This is a character I haven't played. Here they are now. You can see, the layout's a little bit different, but most importantly, if you look, you'll notice there's folds, because what you're supposed to do when you set up is fold this and use it as a player shield that you keep your Nuyen and whatnot behind and your cards. Now, this is a cooperative game. There's nothing in the game about keeping your hand of cards secret from everybody that you might want to play at any given time. So even if you use these as shields, I wouldn't necessarily do this. Again, this was an idea that was introduced in Dragonfire, and most people agree, why even do it? Just leave it flat on the ground so everybody can see at a glance what your stickers are, everybody can see what your cards are, everybody can see how much you have, so that you can, work together cooperatively that much better. But there is one thing I do like about it. Oh, and also, the way everybody can see how many hit points you have is, we've got these little clips, and they go on the top here, and when you do it, you can see that, oh, I can see I've got 5 hit points, or 4 hit points, and everybody else sitting around the table, they can see it also, because the clip works on both sides. And on the other side, you get this really nice artwork of the cyberpunk Seattle of the future. And what I do like about this is, even though I wouldn't necessarily use these to hide all your stuff, because there's just no reason to do it. It's just this weird thing that they suggest you do. I mean, I guess you could do it to increase difficulty by not letting players know what you can do, but but I still like them anyway because as they are, everybody has them, lying around. It creates a kind of a feel of the cityscape. Where's my favorite one? It's, so they all look really nice. The ones with the Space Needle, Seattle's my favorite city in the world. So I love playing with Jen when she's got this Space Needle here and she's like, oh, it feels more atmospheric. It feels more like we're in the world if you can see these really nice looking cityscapes because everybody, gives the game a little bit of a 3D feel. So that's kind of nice. I mean, some people won't like it because some people won't like putting these folds in and all that. And they'd rather just lay them flat. I totally get that. But for ambiance, it is actually fairly cool. But still, that has nothing to do with gameplay. Like I said, it's just entirely ambiance. But anyway, so that's it for characters. That's it for the tokens. So anyway, we got these new tokens that we use to keep track of damage on players, and you're also supposed to use them on obstacles as well. The old game came with these weird triangle pieces that you could get bumped around and you'd lose track of how much damage somebody's taken. Now you just use these little clips. And you can see how, that, okay, I've gone this far, I still got to do a blue and a red. Now I've done the blue, and now, boom, he's gone. And then you just take the clip off and discard. So, some people like the clips, some people don't. I think they're really cool. I have seen some people complain that because these are black bordered cards, you start getting nicks and chips. So, that's something to bear in mind. It might be an issue for you if you're not careful. But hey, if you're really bothered, you can just use one of these tokens and do it the way the old game worked. Alrighty, so there's one last change that has been made, and this is again a change that makes the game easier for players, and it has to do with what happens if somebody gets staggered. In the original game, if somebody got staggered, then, not staggered, if somebody goes critical, after you've been staggered, and if you take more damage, you go critical. At that point, the mission is over. You have no choice. And everybody else, or at least one player amongst your teammates, after one player goes critical, one player has to survive one round of all the bad guys trying to beat everybody else. Coming off of, once this person is critical, no one's attacking, the bad guys come off of that, and will attack the next player. If your team, at least one member of your team, can make it to the end without getting staggered, you win an abort. You successfully abort, which means you get karma. Now, that's still pretty much the same, except when somebody gets critical, the team has the option of aborting. And I gotta say, I love that. Because you might have to do an abort when you feel like, oh no, we could make it. We're in the third scene. There's only 2 bad guys left. Let's not abort. Let's just push on. We'll let you die and we can finish it. I think that's really cool. I really like that idea that you have that option. That is great, giving players more choices about how they want to proceed. So, aborts are optional. But there's another thing. If you choose to abort, the game has gotten so much easier now, because now, if our human friend here gets staggered, and that means these 2 characters have to make it through, they choose to abort and they have to make it to the end. It used to be that if either of them got staggered, if both of them got staggered, they both lost their hit points, then it's over. Now, it's if both of them go critical. Is that what it is? Yes, it's as long as there's at least one person who hasn't gone critical, they can get staggered, but as long as they don't get critical, the abort is successful. And that means aborts are going to succeed all the time. And I don't understand that. I do not think that's a good choice. I think that makes the game way too easy. It's all but guaranteed that you're going to be able to abort successfully. And I don't know, I guess that's fine because it means you can level up faster, because a successful abort means you at least earn 1 karma instead of the normal 3 you would get. But I think that makes things way too easy, and it kind of robs the special excitement of what abort used to be. I think it makes the game weaker. In the interest of trying to make the game easier for players, it's made the game weaker. That's my opinion. Others might disagree. I guess if you are going to play with this exhausted stuff, which again, I really don't like these because these make it harder, it kind of makes sense. You'd say, okay, to heck with it. Let's change this rule for abort so aborts are a lot easier. Maybe that kind of evens out. Anyway, so that's the main stuff. The only thing I haven't talked about is a couple extra bonuses. Hey, it is the Harlequin. And it's Oni. These were 2 special characters that were promos that that have been hard to get ever since. They are now available. If they weren't put in the box, you'd probably have to go out of your way to find them or print them out yourself and whatnot. These are just kind of fun little special characters. I'm sure they're known characters from the Shadowrun universe. I don't know the Shadowrun universe at all, but they are here. It's just kind of a nice little bonus to mix things up a little bit more. And that's it, folks. That's what you get in Shadowrun Crossfire, the Prime Runner Edition. Overall, This is still my second favorite game of all time. Even with those little complaints, I still think this is worth getting. I know some people will be disappointed that the other content from High Caliber Ops didn't make it in here, and nobody knows if High Caliber Ops is going to get a reprint. Plus, this is very hard to find. If you do get the Prime Runner Edition, it is totally compatible with this expansion. So if you find this, it'll still work with that. And maybe they'll reprint this eventually. Who knows? Nobody knows what the future plans are for Shadowrun Crossfire. But, folks, I would have happily played just regular Shadowrun non-Prime Runner Edition for the rest of my life, even without High Caliber Ops, because the core game is so good. The core game is still really good. And if you want to stick to those original rules and not implement those changes, just ignore the exhausted, ignore that nerfing, ignore those little bonuses you get. But like I said, I think on the whole, this is a cool evolution of the game, and I'm glad it's out there for folks who do want to seek it out, who have missed out on the original first print of the cooperative deck building game, Shadowrun Crossfire. And that's the rundown, folks. Thanks very much for watching. Have a very nice day. Talk to you later. So long. Bye-bye.